Hey guys, so just recently we were up in Tigerton, Wisconsin at the off-road park hanging out with Wisconsin's coalition of four-wheel drive vehicles, and one of the guys was asking us about his Jeep and where he should get started and what the next modifications should be. Now, this doesn't pertain strictly to Jeep owners in this video, as this video is for anybody that's just getting started in the process of building their own off-road vehicle. Now, it can become quite overwhelming as to where we should start building our vehicle, what modifications we should do, and where does that even end? What does that even look like? Well, it all comes down to beginning with the basics. And all we're really gonna do is break these modifications, these beginner upgrades, into a few different categories. First one being traction. Sometimes this is all you need. Of course, combined with some off-roading driving skill, can really get you through a lot of pretty challenging obstacles. This one is easy. The best place to start in the traction category is really a good set of tires. And I'm not just talking about street or highway tires, but an all-terrain or hybrid or rugged terrain tire, or even a mud terrain type of tire is really a great place to go. You don't even necessarily need bigger tires to start, but definitely tires rated for the types of terrain that you plan on driving over. Now, next thing is recovery gear and proper tow points to secure a kinetic rope or a winch line to. And even if it's just like a $20 or $40 come along and a $20 D-ring shackle with the screw pin type pin that goes into it, that's really just all you need to get started. Now, it builds up after that, but one thing that you don't want to do is get out in the woods or out on the trail, and if you're by yourself, which you always want to at least have some people with you if you're going to go off-roading, especially if you're just getting started, but you want to have some way to self-extract. So get yourself out of a sketchy situation if you get high centered up on a rock, or you get stuck in the mud or sand or whatever the case may be. You definitely want to have a way that you can get yourself out of that situation. If not, at least have the gear or equipment with you to be able to have somebody else that might be nearby to help pull you out of that situation. So just having recovery gear and a great set of tires is really a huge step in getting you down those trails and getting you to where you need to go. It can get you a long ways. Just one thing to really make sure of is that the recovery gear and the tow points are rated for your vehicle. For the tow points, make sure that they're fastened securely with grade 8 or better hardware to the frame of your vehicle. Make sure you're not using open hooks because they can break, snap off, and that metal can go flying through things that you just don't want it to go flying through. So make sure that you're being safe about it, but make sure the equipment is definitely rated for the weight of your vehicle and then some. My rule of thumb is if you end up putting a recovery bumper on the front or a winch bumper on the front and a recovery bumper on the rear, to at least plan for double the weight of your vehicle loaded. So what I mean by that is, just for example purposes, let's say you're at 5,000 pounds and you want to throw a winch on there because you have the winch bumper. Make it so that the winch is at least 10,000 pounds. Now, that might not be as necessary in some parts of the United States where maybe you're not getting buried in the mud, where the mud is basically holding the vehicle in place and the winch power just takes that much more to get it unstuck. But if that's the case, maybe you can go by that rule of thumb of 1.5 times the weight of the vehicle. So 5,000 pounds, half of that 2,500. So add 2,500 onto 5,000. Then you want a winch capable of at least 7,500 pounds, which is about an 8,000 pound winch. That's the rule of thumb across the board. However, for us up here in Wisconsin, we at least double it, just because there's been situations where we do get stuck in the mud and there would be no way 8,000 pound winch, it would have burnt up or something would have broke off. So I guess in certain parts of the United States, depending on where you're at, probably just double that amount of winching power if that's the case. But recovery gear is a big deal for getting you down the trail and getting yourself out of some pretty precarious situations. So we have tires, we have recovery gear. Next thing, well, we want to separate some distance in between the bottom of our vehicle and the trail or the ground below. So ground clearance. How do we do that? Well, I know I said earlier that you don't necessarily need bigger tires, but bigger tires do absolutely help in getting you over some of those larger obstacles, because it's just because the tire is bigger and the circumference is bigger, so the rolling mass is just going to be larger to get you over those larger obstacles. But not only that, it gets you more ground clearance. And remember, for traction out in the trail, we want to air down our tires to increase that footprint of the contact patch of when our tires touching the ground. So lower air pressures in the tires, kind of sort of flattens out the footprint of our tire, and then that'll give us more traction as well. But by doing that, you're decreasing the amount of ground clearance. So if you do step up to a larger tire, even if you don't have a suspension lift, you air down, and that'll basically compensate or offset each other. So bigger tire airing down, you're still going to lower your ground clearance. But if you combine a bigger tire with let's say a 2 to 4 inch suspension lift, then possibilities are almost limitless. A 2 to 4 inch suspension lift is really enough to tackle a huge percentage of the trails here in the United States, especially if you're getting into more overlanding style of wheeling. Whereas if you're rock crawling and your vehicle is purposely built to tackle some pretty challenging terrains, well, then that's a whole different story. Then you might need a larger lift and more flex on your suspension, and the list just goes on and on. But really, a 2 to 4 inch suspension lift with a little bit bigger of a tire is a phenomenal place to start to get you to just about anywhere you're looking to go on just about any trail here in the States. Now, granted, not all of them, and there's a lot of challenging trails out there, but you guys get the point. This is just a simple overview on breaking down where to start with your off-road vehicle, and we want to keep it simple. So if it's a good suspension lift, it's going to have your replacement coil springs, if that's what your vehicle has, replacement leaf springs. We're looking to stay away from things like spacers in between the coil and the top of the spacer mount or top of the spring mount. We want an actual replacement coil spring, or we want a replacement coil over where the shock is inside the coil, or we want replacement leaf springs, because the thing is with replacing those components is that they are going to be specifically engineered and designed for your particular application. So you're going to get a little bit more performance out of going with a replacement spring or replacement coil or leaf spring or whatever the case may be. Added on top of that, to get upgraded shock in that suspension lift is another good indication that that suspension lift is going to be specifically designed for your particular application. So if you're looking for a good suspension lift, look for those replacement components. Look for a suspension lift that has at least monotube shocks compared to twin tube shocks. Monotube shocks, to put it simply, they just don't allow the gas and the oil that's in the shock to be able to come in contact with each other, because when that happens, you get things like cavitation, and then the shock is basically rendered useless. Whereas a monotube, that doesn't happen. You're going to get a lot more longevity and performance out of a monotube shock. If you want to take a step up from there, you're looking at like a piggyback reservoir shock, which just means that there's a piggyback reservoir that's attached to the shock body itself that can allow more capacity for oil in that shock, and the shock's not going to heat up as much, and it's just going to have better performance and longevity. And then on top of that, another step up from there is like a coilover or a remote resi, which is basically just a remote reservoir that's not attached to the shock body itself, but it is connected through a hose that allows for a lot more capacity of fluid, doesn't allow the shock to heat up. Plus, there's more specific parts inside of that shock to control dampening and compression, things like that. So anyways, kind of getting off on a tangent here, but make sure it's got a good shock, at least a monotube and up. So that kind of suspension combined with 2 to 4 inches of lift with a bigger set of tires is really a phenomenal place to start. Add in some recovery gear so you can get yourself out of a sticky situation, guys. And that is it. Start there. Now, granted, I know there's going to be a lot more modifications and upgrades that you're going to be looking at to put on your vehicle to continuously enhance the performance of your vehicle. But if you just wanted to break it down into a few different things to get started, where do you start? Lift, tires, recovery gear, and go from there, right? So for tires, I got a couple of quick recommendations. Kenda Cleaver RTs, phenomenal tire for the price. I can't recommend them enough. If you're looking to keep the price lower, but you still want that best bang for the buck from what I've seen and found out there on the market, Kenda Cleaver RTs, great way to go. In fact, I have them right here on my cheap Cherokee that still is sitting around. But Anyways, Kenda Cleaver RT is a great way to go. Budget tire for the best bang for the buck. Really high performance tire. It is a little bit of a heavier tire, but it'll also withstand World War III if that ever comes to fruition. But it's a built tough tire and a great price with high performance capabilities for both on the road and on the trail. Another highly recommended tire, Mickey Thompson. Mickey Thompson does it right. They engineer and design their tires in the off-road atmosphere environments first, and then bring that tire to market. So they're specifically designed out in the off-roading environments and engineered to really have that maximum capabilities out in the trails. And they have an asymmetrical design, so you're getting a couple of different tread patterns in the same tread pattern itself to optimize that road and trail traction. So it is a little bit more pricey for the Mickey Thompson, especially the Baja Boss line, but that is really a phenomenal way to go if you have the extra cash to swing the Mickey Thompsons. Definitely, I can't recommend those enough. So anyways, guys, what I'd really like to hear back from all of you guys is if you've been wheeling for a while, you've built your rig already, or at least are through a few stages of your build on your vehicle, but where did you start? It'd be great to hear from all of you, and by just letting us know in the comments below. And guys, of course, if you didn't already know, we do sell tires, wheels, suspension, and accessories right on our website at TrailBuilt, plus we'll have a link in the description below. But if you guys do have anything else for us, definitely let us know. And guys, as always, we appreciate all of you for watching and all of your support. I'm Josh from TrailBuilt, and we'll see you guys out on the trails.